Yes, and we're back. We're continuing our HFES 2022 conference coverage. I'm sitting here with Rose Figueroa. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
Great. Well, Rose, you're here to talk about the DIA AG. That's a lot of letters. It's the Disability and Chronic Illness Affinity Group. We're shorthand. We're going to call it Disability or Accessibility Affinity Group throughout the course of this. Let's just start at the top. Like, what is it?
Well, there's a series of AGs, the affinity groups. So we have the LGBTQ plus, the BIPOC, and other groups. The women that was the oldest and the one that broke to start these other groups. But this one is more to create the community for the people that may have some sort of disability or chronic illness, and or people that want to be allies and advocates and learn more on how to help that community, especially within HFES. So that's how it started, which is interesting because I was just remembering that 2 years ago, maybe during a conference, I went on a rant like with you, criticizing how there's a lot of areas of improvement for accessibility. And next thing you know, I was founding the DCIAG, and HFES was giving a lot of good stuff to us. So
Yeah,
they listen.
that's good.
I mean, that's a really brilliant thing to hear, that the fact that you've gone around, you realized that there's a big gap, and you've been able to go and do something about it. What sort of activities do you get up to in the affinity group? What sort of things do you get up to on a what have you done this year?
Well, that would be a compounded question versus what we want to do and what we're doing. So based on the volunteer hours, because we're small and we is the newest affinity group in the society, we have done just quarterly meetings, and that was based on the community. They asked to be quarterly instead of monthly, like we gave them the option. And what we do is, some of them we just meet as a community and we just catch up. There's no specific topic, and we can brainstorm on what would be our mission and what do we want to do. And then there's some that we have had speakers. So we actually had one of the meetings, everybody was asking that, wouldn't it be great if we have an attorney to please help us and navigate what reasonable accommodations look like, what can we ask, what are we entitled, or what should we not ask, or how to do that. So for the next meeting, Emily, from she's a former EEOC, so the Equal Employment Commission. So she came in and she was willing to give a really great presentation, and everybody loved it. And she was very knowledgeable, of course, but also she did that very tailored answering the questions and being available. So that was great to see. So we're doing that, just bringing speakers based on what the community wants. Yeah. And then other things that we want to do is just as simple as coffee chats and virtual, other things that we just connect the community and have advocates and allies be able to listen and see how they can help us too.
So I want to get sort of a little personal here. So you and I actually had a chance to talk last night at the opening ceremony, and there was a moment of realization on my part where I realized that this group would interest me because of my ADHD. And it was one of those moments where I was just like, how many other types of things like this might go sort of unrecognized as a disability, and when do people sort of have that moment of clarity that I had last night, that this is something I should care about? Not that I didn't before. It's incredibly important for affinity groups, but just that I feel like I belong now a little bit, right? So I guess the question is, right, what would you tell folks who think they may or may not sort of qualify for these disabilities?
Well, yeah, it's one of them. And that note, and that came in because we had a great question from a student in the student panel for interviews, that she was like, how do we help, and what tools do you give to people that have some disabilities like ADHD to excel in an interview? And it was great for me. That was my favorite question because we didn't know the answer in the panel. We're just like, I mean, I don't know necessarily. And my answer was, well, at least if you start coming to these groups, you may meet people that may have been through that process, that they had the disability, and that they're willing to share their, tools that they use, what work for them, etc. So I would just say, it could be as simple as go on the government list and see if you qualify. I believe even celiac people are actually encompassed in the ADA, disability, because they do need a reasonable accommodation. And I give that example because that's another group that they may not even think that they're in the disability group. Um, but if you join the group, even if just as like passive, listener and advocate, then you may realize that you do belong. And if I mean you belong anyway, because everybody's welcome. um, but it is a way of you can start learning a little bit more, how can it help. And I would just say there's also age, hearing loss,
Right.
vision loss, like things like that, that you may think that you could get good use of being in that community and being exposed to those resources that we share while we're in those meetings.
Right.
So this might feel as a slightly unfair question to a certain extent, given how young you are as an organization. But what do you think's been your biggest achievement this year?
um there are actually a few, which is interesting because yes, we're so new, so we're still
Brilliant.
looking for volunteers. Hashtag help us, please. But you know, the accessibility for the conference, there's a lot that still can be done, but the fact that they did listen, so like they, the organization understood that I have limited hours too. Like I have my day job and my other jobs and my other things to do.
Mhm.
And you cannot rely only on the members, especially from a affinity group, because the affinity groups are not meant to be the advocates and the people that do the volunteering work. It's meant to be a community. So you should not expect them to do the work. We can if we want, right?
Yeah.
But the whole point is like everybody should feel welcome, and that when you join our group, you're not expected to do any work. This is just so that you meet like-minded folks, like from your same affinity group. But if you go to the HFES, the conference website, there's a tab for the accessibility. The EC, they actually got a paid, consultant for accessibility, and that was based on our recommendations, such that we can help, we can guide. They actually asked for my input for the documents that the consultant wrote and sent to the presenters, for like how to do a poster that is accessible and a presentation, etc. But they were not making it my job to build that document. They gave the resters, the consultant to start, and then the only thing that we were doing is just giving the input as the members, because we know HFES more than an outsider in that sense.
So I think an interesting question to follow up to that is what is sort of the most surprising thing that you found out, either working with HFES or in the disability affinity group? Like, what is the most surprising thing?
Um, let's see. So that the most surprising thing.
It's a good question.
Yes, it is a good question.
You're welcome.
I guess it would just be it's even the effort that it takes to do some of these things, right? Like when you're just a member and you're saying like, oh, this could be done better. Sure, it's better said than done in general, right? But there's some processes, there's some, even the approvals and whatnot that needs to be done to do it the right way. And the time and effort that it would take, it all depends on our bandwidth, given that we're mainly volunteers. So like, I'm not saying like cut us some slack, but at the same time, it's just like
Right.
understanding that we have limited time as well. So that was for me somewhat surprising. Like now that I'm in that side, that I'm just like, there's a lot of things that need to happen, and a lot of pieces and variables that need to move. Even if it's as simple as just having an accessibility tab on the website, right? Like for the conference, um, and but also the willingness for people, like, because when you're on the other side and you're just like, okay, it could be done better, but we're human factors, they should know that, so you're assuming that they know, but sometimes it's the knowledge. So like it was just like they just didn't know, that there was a need for that because people were not coming and complaining, which is also understandable, right? Like if you didn't feel that you belong and then you just step back and left the organization, then they're never gonna know why did you leave.
Right.
Yeah, it the things you've been saying actually is sort of resonated to a certain extent. In you're right, we are human factors practitioners. We're all about usability. We're all about engagement. Yet we seem to have had a massive blind spot when it comes to this, and hopefully that's almost you're unveiling or demisting that blind spot for us. So clearly, it's hugely important work. What's the future? What do you see as your sort of short term, maybe medium long term goals that you want to achieve with the Affinity Group?
So, I mean, we're slowly growing, which is one thing. So, as we're getting more volunteers, we can have more events happening throughout the year because then we can have people that are leading their own babies, right? Like something that you actually like, that you enjoy, you can just do that one. Um, Now we have a co-chair that is an aunt, so we will be more active in that sense because now we can divide and conquer. So it will be, now it's establishing a little bit more like the elections, getting a whole committee going, so that we can have a bigger presence, and hopefully that will slowly get to the community, people that may have left over the years because they felt that they didn't belong, that the accommodations were not there, whatnot. So we are here. We are part of HFES and part of the community. And at least we can serve as a voice and connect you to the right people so that um, you feel welcome and you feel like you have the reasonable accommodations that you need, that you deserve as being, part of this community when you come to a conference and when you go to any other event. So I think those are like seeing those things more and more, instead of us asking about like can I get a reasonable accommodation. Now it's more about them offering and being like, it's not a taboo, it's like right there when you're showing that webinar, click here if you need an accommodation, things
Right.
like that. I feel like that's what we're gonna start seeing more and more, which is, thanks to all the volunteers that keep doing that.
So along that line, what type of resources are available to members or non-members now, and what would you like to see in the future?
So there, something that we have been talking in the group is even as like simple resources like daily living stuff, right? If you do a PowerPoint presentation, why don't you have the closed captioning on that actually comes embedded in Microsoft when you're presenting, even if it's on Zoom, right? It's not the best, especially for a non-English, speaker like me, but it's better. We're getting there, right? The AIs, so that things like that, like resources that could be used, not only as a practitioner or like in an employer, but also if you start doing those things as a person, the accommodations, like when you're in a Zoom, maybe you don't need the closed caption, but if you're the one who asks for it, then it's great because you're being an ally, you're being an advocate. So you're not making me ask for it or making somebody that actually needs it. So simple things like that, I think we're gonna start trying to like encourage the members, to to showcase that is as easy as X, Y, and Z examples that you can start doing, at work, at home, etc.
Gotcha.
So, if people want to go on and get in touch and get involved, how would they go around doing that?
Well, I think the website we have, like, sign in for volunteering. You could always just email me, and I can drop my email in the chat as well, or LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn. A lot of people message me through LinkedIn, and I do see them, and may take a little bit more time to respond depending on the influx of messages, but I do see them. And even as simple as like if you say email info at hfes.org, I believe that is just the general email. They're pretty active on that. And if you say like, hey, could you send this message to Rose, the chair of the DCI, and things like that, they do send them. So we do get those too. So it's just get in contact. You want to help? We There's a lot of things we could do.
Now I want to back up a little bit. So we've talked a lot about the Affinity Group. I want to talk a little bit. You're busy this week. You are a very busy person this week. You were telling me last night.
Yes.
What brought you to HFES this year, aside from the Affinity Group?
Well, in general, it's the networking. I do like the community. This is like our, we catch up every year. Um, So it's a way of the networking and get and I see you at least once a year, Nick. So it's cool, right? So that was one of the things that I'm doing. Of course, I'm presenting different technical presentations, and I'm in some panels related to DEI, so diversity, equity, and inclusion too. But yeah, I think the networking overall is one of the main drivers that like get me to come every year. Just catch up with the community and see what's new.
Yeah, and
You can't tease me like that. What you presenting on?
I'm presenting on virtual reality. Actually, I do forensics, so characterizing some variables for virtual reality. We are actually doing a demo with the Vardio, that is a very high-end mixed reality headset, on Friday. Then naturalistic driving and driver behaviors. So it's not VR at all, right? But it's
Wow.
just based on the stuff that I do. And I'm presenting to on, like I said, like panels on the disability, like DEI, bringing DEI to human factors, and yeah, a few of the VR stuff. This year was full on that.
yeah, you wear so many hats within HFES. I guess what would you consider your role within HFES? And it's okay to go down the list of all the hats that you wear, because you're a very active member of the society.
Yeah, so I mean, if you go to my LinkedIn, it's all over. Like, I am a big proponent of like the Latinos and bringing in more Latinos and underrepresented minorities in STEM. But of course, my baby is human factors and biomechanics. So I do connect a lot of people in that sense. Um, so I do like Hispanic Heritage Month, right? Like, at least bringing it is the end of Hispanic Heritage Month this month, and they actually just released the news yesterday, and they highlighted me and a few of other of the Latinos. Which, thank you, HFES, by the way. But yeah, it's just bringing in feeling the belonging of the different minorities that we may need to increase the numbers, but you are here even if we're 5 for now or 10, right? Like, we're gonna keep growing and showing ourselves so that others can see themselves in this community too. So that is something. So I do serve in the liaison and reps committee, trying to build partnerships with other organizations like SHIP, that is the Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers, and things like that.
That's brilliant. So you have all of these things, and you're clearly a very plugged in and a very involved person. Why? Why do you, I mean, as a big
I don't know, man.
I'm a sucker for volunteer roles myself. I do a similar thing, and quite often my wife is asking me, Barry, why? So I'm going to put that back on you. Why the keenness to be involved?
So some of them is just I happen to be in the middle. I just happen to be the connection, and next thing I know, uh, it happened years back with Hurricane Maria, right? Like, I happened to be in the middle, and I ended up leading the hurricane statewide relief efforts for Puerto Rico in Michigan. So it was like I just happened to be there. In this case, HFES, because I guess I'm not scared of talking and saying what I think, respectfully, and talking to the right people, and identifying the right stakeholders that could get something done, or at least get it moving and get us in the right direction. So I feel like I have to, because then I can see it how it can get done. Then I feel that I'm passionate about it. I can help others. Like, I wish I had these opportunities, and this showcasing, right? Like, when I was a student, or even I don't know, like 10 years ago, right? Like, so I feel like if I can and help others that are coming behind me to make it, paving the path so it's easier, why not?
Yeah. So lots of hats, lots of stuff going on at HFES this year. I know it's only been one day, but I don't know. I feel like I've already lived an entire week. What have you gotten out of the conference so far on day one? Technically one.
Oh yeah, it has been. I had the student session, so it was the interview panel in the morning, which I was surprised. Like, I thought there were gonna be just like 10 students. It's the first session in a Monday, and the room was completely packed. The program that the volunteers did was great, because I started seeing what was coming after, and it was just full of students eager to learn. So that actually, energizes us as the practitioners and people that are trying to mentor and keep showcasing human factors, seeing those students that are very interested, very involved. So a lot of networking in that sense. The award ceremony was pretty nice,
Yeah.
and it was pretty full too, so it's just
Yeah.
catching up with everybody. Like you said, it was a very long day, more than I thought.
I know. I had I talked about it earlier, but I had so many things going on yesterday, setting this up and then running to find like audio equipment last minute, and then running back and trying to network with everybody and track people down and finalize interviews and get things organized. It's a lot going on.
And the other thing that is interesting is that the past years, especially DCI that is new, is that I have been having meetings in Zoom for the past 2 years with the COAG, so the coalition of AGs, so all the chairs and the heads, the leaders, and I just met them in person yesterday. So it's like I feel like I know you. We have had like calls that is literally venting about work, like personal, like we build our personal relationships with some of these folks, and I have never seen them in person, and it didn't pass through our minds that yes, this was the first time that we saw each other in person.
Barry, I've heard that before.
Yeah, I was going to say me and Nick have never actually met. Everything we've done over the past year or so that we've been doing this now, it's we've been doing it like this. I'm fairly convinced that he doesn't actually exist. He's just like a character in the Matrix. But I think if I can just throw in one last question at you, if you don't mind. There's a lot of stuff that you've done here, which I think is really impressive, really valuable. And obviously over here in the UK, we are probably we are looking at EDI, and there is people over there from the UK presenting on EDI this year at the conference. But what is there a way of being able to package some of the lessons that you've learned and be able to share them with other communities such as ourselves over here in the UK that we can learn from what it is that you've done?
So I'm actually in a panel today with some Courtney from the UK.
Oh, Courtney, right,
on
yes.
the DEI stuff. Yes.
Amanda, yeah.
So again, I've not met in person yet, but we
Yeah.
have been we wrote a paper together. So I would just say, I mean, there's a couple things. There are people that even within the community, like Nick and I were talking yesterday, like I ended up having, finding this niche because I've been doing this advocacy for more than 10 years now. And I do have my own consulting company on it, and I bring in the human factors. So one of the panels that we're doing today is actually doing that. I think it may be recorded, but it's just how are you bringing DEI to human factors, or using your human factors knowledge, your background, so that you can incorporate that DEI, and it could be as simple as like using the right metrics, understanding we're data people, so let's use that when you're bringing the case, like build your business case, be impactful, tailored. So I guess in general, people in the UK, US, anywhere, it's about identifying that gap, and it's better to do small steps, incremental changes, than trying to just conquer the world to start with, which it just helps because then you have data too, so that you can actually understand if it was actually impactful. So I'm a big proponent of tailored initiatives that are impactful versus let's just wave our hand and do something big, let's say, just for the sake of doing it.
Yeah.
In the DEI perspective, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. One last question for you. You have a lot going on. What are you most looking forward to over the next couple days?
There were a few, right? Like one of them was just like I told you, the networking and meeting up people in person for the first time that I have been writing papers and meeting for years now, because of COVID. But it's just the diversity of the sessions too, and with me, I'm gonna be installed now as the director for the BCPE, which again, I'm meeting all the people in person now. We're gonna have the business meeting, so I'm also looking forward to that, because it's just they always do that meeting at the end of HFES. So and see how we can help. And again, I can bring all the, you know, the DEI view and outreach aspect to BCP and the partnerships that they do, and HFES too. But yeah, overall it's just listening to the people. I've been listening a lot and seeing what else people need and want, especially from the communities that I represent, so that then I can do some sort of summary and bringing it up and see how what can we do and what can, you know, HFES do to help us and keep, you know, empowering us.
Well, Rose, thank you for being on the show. You're always welcome here. I think the last time we talked was just on a human factors hangout that we did on a stream when technology wasn't working or something. You're always welcome on the show. Thank you for stopping by. We'll be right back. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with our next guest right after this. Yes, hello. Welcome back to our coverage of HFES's 66th annual meeting. I am echoing again. Jeez, I really need to. Barry, you need to call me on these things before we go live, man. There we go. All right. Yeah, I know you did. Hey, welcome back to our annual meeting coverage, Human Factors Economics Society, 66th annual meeting. I'm sitting here with Jules Trippe. Jules, welcome to the show. I am so happy to have you here. I've been wanting you on for a long time.
It's nice.
Personally.
It's really nice.
So today we'll be talking about the LGBTQ plus affinity group. We've talked to a couple folks about affinity groups today, and I just think they're an incredibly important aspect of the society. So I'd love to pick your brain a little bit. Can you tell us just what the affinity group is?
Yeah, so actually that's not as simple a question as you would imagine, but really the intention behind starting these affinity groups a few years ago was really to help folks feel comfortable in this organization that might not see themselves represented necessarily when they came to the conference or even in other, you know, smaller groups of folks that are in HFES. It tends to be kind of a traditional organization in terms of, you know, you'll see a lot of academic types and sort of professors and things like that. So there were a lot of suits walking around, and folks that were, you know, a little bit different in one way or the other might not feel comfortable. And so we wanted to, and, you know, of course, that difference is just entirely defined by whoever the dominant paradigm. So we wanted folks to feel comfortable and to feel like they had a cohort and like they had people to talk to, maybe a mentor if they needed, certainly people to help guide them if they needed in their career, or just sort of personal choices around, you know, how to work from the margins, right?
Yeah.
That's really interesting to hear, and we've heard a fair bit around affinity groups today, and just really the really strong impact they're having in the way that HFES is now delivering. What has been, I guess, what's been your biggest achievements this year? If there's some, are there some standout things that you've managed to achieve? Or, I mean, clearly everything's going to be brilliant, but is there some things that stand out?
Well, I have to tell you, it's the little things, right? It's the non-binary bathrooms.
Yeah, I noticed that. There's a sign.
Yeah, I mean, it's like and I stumbled into it the other day, and it just looked so natural. I just kind of walked in, and you know, there were the urinals and the stalls, and it was just awesome because me, you know, being raised female, I'm not used to seeing urinals in the bathroom, so that was very nice. But then I couldn't find it again when I was looking for it. So there are victories, and then there are little setbacks. Like there should be, you know, pervasive signage to tell you how to find that restroom if you want to. Yeah, that's a really big thing. But I have to say, the biggest thing and the most heartwarming thing for me is just seeing all the queer people here. And I mean, not to mention people of color and stuff like that, but really folks are feeling more comfortable. And I think it has a lot to do with, you know, in COVID, we all had a little wake up call and we're able to kind of come home to ourselves and be a little bit more expressive about who we are, and sort of not roll with the punches so much as we've been used to. So I think people are more, you know, more out in and of themselves and in their own lives. But I think also we've made a point of telling folks, you know, you're welcome here, and certainly not just welcome, but, you know, we need you and the future needs you. And, you know, when it comes to, you know, human factors and design and stuff, we have to take everybody into consideration, and marginalized communities can just tell us so much about what we're missing, you know, what we've missed for a long time. So yeah, I find those to be huge things. Unfortunately, our ribbons didn't make it this year. We had ribbons last year with all the flag colors and all that kind of stuff. I was looking forward to that, but didn't happen. But there's a lot of super good stuff. And just across the affinity groups, I mean, now we have a coalition of affinity groups, so there's a lot of good sort of bottom-up ideating going on. And I have to tell you, like, Chris has come by and said hi to me, you know, 4 times during this thing, see how I'm doing. And, you know, Chris Reed, the outgoing president, and Carolyn's been involved in all of these causes, and so she's come to say hi to me too. And I kind of take it for granted because we've been Zooming over the last, few years together, but that's really nice. I mean, definitely people are taking an interest. It's important.
I want to jump in because there's sort of a question about the cross sectionality between human factors and queerness, and there's within the society itself, but then there's also human factors helping those who identify as LGBTQ IAP plus. I'll add in the extra ones there at the end.
What the heck?
And why can't we make the affinity group all those just to be a little bit more inclusive? Anyway,
I would go with queer, just
queer affinity group. There you go.
The thing, but some people don't like that. But you're right, we should.
So I mean, where is that intersection between human factors and queerness, and how can we make a difference?
A difference in what way? The queers on human factors or human factors on queers?
Both.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that the cross section is very much, in human factors, we have to have this sort of meta awareness of what it means to be human and how to take that into consideration in sort of our everyday lives, things that we've always taken for granted, or once again, sort of the standard or typical way of looking at things. We've been outside of that all our lives. So we're used to kind of having a little bit of objectivity about that stuff and a lot less attachment to it, because normally that would be a dangerous thing. So I think it's not ridiculous to imagine that there's a huge connection between those things, and I think there's a lot we can gain from that. As far as queers go, I mean, it'll be our affinity group in particular is really a support group, because what we're looking at now with the endangered trans populations in particular, but just sort of everything being up in the air, even gay marriage, which, how mundane can get, and yet it might be revoked, right? So who knows?
Yeah.
But that level of, need for community. And certainly if you're in a space where you feel comfortable professionally, even, let's say your company is accepting of who you are and supportive of your family and all that kind of stuff, still going out in the world as a professional, there's always this shakiness about it. It's like, yeah, well, what if things change? What if the dominant paradigm shifts a little bit and the acceptance isn't there anymore? Then, so when you can come together with professionals of your own ilk and talk about those fears, and without, because you don't want to expose, that's a whole nother thing. You don't want to expose all that stuff necessarily to everybody that you work with, that, because, you want to just be able to have your life and work with them and be a member of the team and not have to talk about your issues all the time. But at the same time, underlying is this constant fear that, maybe if they wake up tomorrow and I'm not in favor, then I'm out of my ear. So we are primarily like a support group, an affinity group, a group of people that, I mean, it's funny, we say affinity group, it's almost like, oh yeah, we're all into Star Trek, but we have an affinity for one another is how I think about it. Yeah. And that's where the affinity lies.
Not to make a joke here, but are you telling me that there's going to be a Star Trek affinity group? Is that what you're saying?
I just thought that might get a little interesting. You could start one. There could be. Yeah.
We need to shut that down straight away. It'd be really, so you talk about it being a support group, the affinity group. How does actually the group run? What is it you actually, I guess, do on a day-to-day basis that helps support people and allows you to support them? Well, how do you achieve that?
Yeah, it's interesting. Actually, we're kind of struggling with that. We've had a lot of iterations. In the very beginning, we were a lot about advocacy within the society and really pushing an agenda, as it were. We're in it for the steak knives and the toasters. But really, that's a so old gay joke. But it's like, you recruit enough people, you get some steak knives. But we were really in it for like trying to educate the higher ups in the society about really what needs to happen in terms of the language. Like I did a whole lot of work on the code of ethics, just trying to get, modern language in there, and certainly language that was palatable to all of the affinity groups and marginalized communities that are represented in the society. So some pretty basic, really simple stuff, but also things like the little things like the ribbons and the bathrooms and stuff. It takes a huge amount of work to get that stuff done. It's just kind of crazy. So, but once we had most of those agenda items ticked off, we're like, okay, now it's time to just support each other. And what that has amounted to is, we have a meeting once a month on Zoom, and folks attend from, I think Mike's in Singapore. I mean, we have people all over the place. And I just said somebody's name, sorry about that. But anyway, all over the place, and lots of students, profs, industry people, all kinds of different folks. And sometimes it'll be like there's three of us there, and we're just talking, but it's just super important. And sometimes folks will drop in like once and you'll see them, and then maybe 6 months later they'll come back one time. It's just a place people can go and they know what to expect in a way, even though you never know what to expect. I mean, the only rule is you're not supposed to talk about work. We try and make that a rule because it just gets a little heavy sometimes. But of course, work comes into it because most of us are passionate about what we do. And so that comes into it, and we get to talk about that stuff too. But mainly that's what it is. It's just sort of a presence like that, and reaching out about specific, say, things that, let's say, like the DEI committee that we have here in the society. If they need input on something, then hopefully we will be the SMEs on that. Which brings up a whole nother point, which is we don't want to have to be our own advocates, but we'll certainly be contributing, just like Nick's lab has asked me for help on some things, just like running things by me. Like, do you think this is cool? Do you think this language is okay about this, about people that you have affinity with? And sometimes I have to check with my people to make sure. I'm not going to say that, I know, everything that anybody's going to be offended by or anything like that. But it takes that kind of questioning. I think it's all, it's flipping things on their head, really, because we all think of ourselves as experts, these scientists, blah, blah, blah. But really, when it comes to this kind of work, you just, from the get-go, you just have to say, yeah, I don't know, but I can be respectful and I can try. And I'm a they them, which just fucks with people. I can talk
That's
however
fine.
I want, right? Yeah, I mean, it just blows people's minds that have known me forever, and it's just the whole thing. And I think the thing people are uncomfortable with is saying, oh, sorry about that, they. Just interrupting themselves, but we're used to a certain cadence, and that spells comfort, in social situations and stuff like that. And so, yeah, and when you're queer and you're overtly queer, then you've got that's in everybody's face all the time, and people just feel challenged by that, rather than thinking about what do we have in common, where are we going with this, what kind of work do you do? It's like, wait, how do I interact with this, this other? So yeah. Anyway, I'm blathering, but hopefully we're giving a space for people to just take a breath, be with one another, maybe see folks that they find, like maybe look a little bit like them, or have to deal with the same things they do.
It's so important. And you keep bringing up this concept of bringing work into it, and maybe even when you're at work, sort of avoiding who you truly are. I think there's sort of the question of, well, what does that actually look like? Because there's a panel this week. We just talked to Christy about bringing yourself to work.
Your
and
whole self,
yeah, and I mean, the concept behind that is obviously to sort of encourage these environments where people feel welcome to be themselves. What type of challenge does that look like in the workplace as a queer professional? And like, what are some small things? Keep mentioning these small changes too. What does it look like as a queer professional, and what small changes can companies make to make it more inclusive? Did I stump you?
No, the small changes. Well, first of all, it's just like nothing small. The small changes I've thought, in professional environments where, I bring things up that I think are simple things to change, small things, ends up being, there's this entropy, just sort of the gravitational pull of corporate America, whatever, that make everything difficult. So anything that is a little bit different, anything that causes, people to pause or doubt or anything, can be super, super difficult. But I'd say, well, like you're saying, helping it be an open environment, a comfortable environment for folks. And, where I work, I'm definitely one of the oldest new employees, meaning age-wise. I'm old, but I'm relatively new to the company. And coming in, it was like really clear to me that certain things were not necessarily, uh, fair for everybody or even for everybody. Not, and it's not so much in terms of treatment, but just sort of language. I'm also a linguist, so that's my training, and I'm really hyper tuned into communication and how people talk about stuff. And so trying to bring people's attention to the tiny things that we do every day. So just within my company, I try and have little, they're not even workshops, like these 20-minute blurbs with the whole company, where I can say, if you just use y'all, then you just don't need to worry about the rest of it, y'all or folks or whatever, or address people by their name until you know what their pronouns are. little things like that are so simple, but they are so difficult. Social change, I mean, it's just huge because it's threatening, on an animal level. It's like, wait, am I just tagging myself as different? And then I got the target on my back now. I don't know about that. But so it's little things like that, and hopefully people being able to step into there. And I have to say, I mean, younger folks these days in general are very cued into that, all of those environments, but still are cowed by the heaviness of the hierarchy, right? So I don't know
Yeah,
if that answered any of that.
Guys, gals, non-binary pals. That's my favorite.
You know what I love? Somebody said to me in a restaurant the other day, and I could see it. The service industry are just plagued by this stuff, right? What the hell am I supposed to say?
Yeah.
And this person was just like, friend. They said, thanks, friend. That was
Oh,
everybody
that's
was
so
friend.
good.
And I thought, oh, that's cool. Not everybody can pull it off, but that was really
Yeah.
nice. Yeah.
the generational thing you say, I think, is quite strong because with younger children, my eldest is 18, and sort of going down from there, they just seem to take to this so much easier. It's just a given. And so for me, that it feels like there is hope that actually we're going through a transitional stage rather than something much longer than that. But what
Mhm.
can we as allies do? How can we support the LGBTQ plus community going forward?
Once again, it seems like a
Sorry,
sweet question.
how can you help
That's
protect
really
the children?
interesting. As you're asking me, and I'm feeling stumped. I'm thinking, why am I stumped? And one, like, is it actually safe to ask? For anything? Do I want to put that on the table? And two, like, what do I consider to be an ally?
Mhm.
And I have to say, it's the people that in the moment will say, wait, we haven't heard from you yet. How do you feel about this? Those people that are willing to take, and you've heard this probably a million times, especially as a white guy. I don't know the rest of you, but I'm thinking with the beard and the voice and the kid and all that. But just to say, I'm going to use a little bit of my privilege here and bring this person into the conversation. And it's not just because I'm a nice guy, but it's because I already value what they have to say before it comes out of their mouth. I don't know what it is, but I know it's going to be a little bit different perspective. Probably we can bring that into the room, or we can make whatever we're building, whether it's community or a conversation or a jet airplane, we can make it better. With hearing from everyone, and when everybody does feel comfortable on that level, I mean, it's so cliche, but we all win. How can we not say it? We all freaking win if everybody's in the room and can actually speak what's in their imagination. I mean, good Lord, imagine, right? So, in all these voices that we're starting to hear now in the wake of, George Floyd, all the horrible things that have happened that have helped people sort of come out of the closet and say how they've stayed strong all of these years, all of those secrets. So, and they're tools that we can all use, and they're magical ways of being with one another that we can all use. So being open to that, and I would say whatever comes out of you, Barry, as a result of you in your mind feeling like, oh, everyone contributes, and whatever this beautiful person that looks really unfamiliar to me doesn't map onto anything that's recognizable in my universe, I'm sure they have something to teach me, to show me. And you don't have to poke them and say, show me something, teach me something, you're my new shaman, but just being respectful and paying attention and making space for that.
It sounds like the thing for allies to do. I'm hearing two different things, right? One is you shouldn't have to ask. You should just do things that are basic, common human decency. And two, the things that should also be included in that package should be some of these things that don't make people feel threatened by default based on any piece of them that
Nice.
that
Yeah.
may be sort of impacted by the things that they say, the nonverbal language that they're communicating,
Yeah.
anything like that, right? So it's kind of like this. The hope is that allies would just be passive in the sense of sort of nonverbal communication and neutral in terms of the way that they communicate.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You're so right. This is really interesting because I've been thinking a lot lately about this sort of, the straight white guy privilege, cis straight white guy privilege kind of thing that people are so unaware of in general, but a lot of people are not. Like Nick, I consider you in that sense.
But I'm not aware. Yeah.
But,
no,
but the whole thing is the interesting part of that is that power comes with a price, and we all know this. Like, I'm an old feminist, being raised anyway as a girl and everything, and being a really strong feminist. I know that comes with a penalty, and the penalty is there's this little chest plate, that comes with that privilege, and it's like, okay, but I can't let them too close, because this sternum is penetrable, and God forbid I turn my back on them, while they're pissed about some little, some social norm that I've trespassed on by either, holding my hand in a certain way or wearing pink or whatever in the sense of like queerness. But even if you're not queer, you know what I mean? Those things, everybody knows the rules and you could be in big trouble. And so I think that's the thing that we need to recognize, that is a sacrifice. I mean, there was a young guy that used to be my neighbor, and he was a, cis straight white guy, had a kid, he was like the perfect, young guy, and he was like, wait a second, how long am I going to have to be, this guy that has to say, can we let them speak, can we do, how long am I going to have to do this behavior of being an ally, how long am I going to do it? And I was like, dude, you're in it, you chose to be born in this body and this is part of the price. And he was like, oh, it just killed him. And it's like, that's difficult. I mean, I can understand that. That's difficult, not just to get to ride the wave, but of course there are a lot of benefits that come from it. And I think Nikki put it really perfectly, just to try and, toning down the aggro, which most people don't even feel, but even you can do that by absorbing some of the other aggro in the room. It might not be you, right? But you can just kind of let it flow, not, don't have to put the chest plate up yet. And just making space in that way, and in all honesty, just believe in it. I mean, it's what is that? So Peter Pan or something, but it's true. It's like, just believe in it.
Just believe that people are equal,
everybody
right?
has value, right? Yeah.
It seems to be a strange thing to a certain extent that we as a human factors community should have to make the extra special effort to think about affinity groups. And it just, why do we should be just doing it by default, but it's clear we don't, and it's even I like to think that we as a human factors community are, the people who go and ask how people are, how people contribute to their work, but it just proves that that we still have some way to go. With your work that you've done with the affinity group so far, and some of the stuff you've already told me kind of hits this mark already, but what's been the most surprising thing you found out?
My own ignorance.
How do you mean?
Well, being raised a well-meaning, guilt-ridden liberal, white, middle class, cis, whatever, just my own ignorance about the depth of pain and insecurity and not fitting in, and challenge that so many people have. And and I'm facile with language, and I've always gotten good grades and been athletic, all these things that make me just sort of fit into the culture in ways that go unspoken, but where you get a lot of cred. You can just sort of walk in the room, and I never really fit gender wise anywhere, but it sort of didn't matter because I just could kind of play the in between, little sister, buddy, whatever, however people had to look at it to make it work. But it blinded me, to a lot of pain. And I used to think, well, being queer was enough. Like, I could relate to pain, but I can't relate to, wearing stuff on my skin to the degree that people do, or in my language, to have a certain accent that's going to label me as, I have a TV accent. I was raised outside DC, right? I always said I have a TV accent. But, some folks, just the minute they speak a word, even an American English dialect, God forbid, second language English dialect, immediately are put into a box. So yeah, it's just that, it's my own lack of knowledge, but I've come to see it that way. In the beginning, I thought, I'm stupid, I should have thought of that. It's like, no, that is not my experience. I don't need to have known that, but I do need to know enough to ask someone about their reality before I make assumptions.
Yeah. So what's next for the affinity group?
Yeah, I think we want to make it like I'm stepping out as a co-chair. I've been in it for a few years, and Hannah's going to maintain, and we're electing a new person in the near future. And I think it is, what is it that we need? Because, okay, what's interesting about a support group is that people have to label themselves kind of in need, to go to that. A lot of times, a much better entree is, what can I do to help? What can I do? So I think having projects is a nice thing, whether it's, trying to change the agenda of the society, or going into grade schools, coming up with like events that we can have, or ways that we can have of interacting with younger people that might need support in these areas. Um, I've been working on a memorandum of understanding with OSTEM, which is out in science, technology, and math. And, things like that are always on the table. But all that advocacy stuff, like I said, we don't want to weigh down the affinity group with that. So I think, we just want to reach out and find out what people want. Do you want, to play games, or, what do you need? Because folks honestly don't know what they need. And when they're really in need, it's very hard to reach out, as you all know, I'm sure. So if we can make it a little more of a regular thing for people to take care of themselves by showing up, that'd be awesome. But so far, I tell you, just at this conference, handing out these little flyers with the affinity group meeting times on them, we kind of screwed up by not getting into the program, but I wonder, because it means we have all that FaceTime with people. We get to talk to them about their, what they could gain from that and everything. And that's been really good. The showing this year is really good. I feel a lot of good positive energy, and a lot of folks that are going to be members of these affinity groups are here showing up. Once again, I think COVID made us stronger. Hopefully it still is making us stronger.
I feel we could keep on talking for ages, but Nick's quite rightly prompting me that that we only have limited time with you. So we do really appreciate your time. But what, if you're here for the rest of the conference, what are you most looking forward to seeing in the next few days?
I can't hear what we have to say on that panel. I'm looking forward to the people in the audience saying, "What the hell do you mean, bring your whole self to work?" Which is just like a toxic meme social media now, and I completely believe that. And by the way, just right here for the record, I'm just going to say what that means is you bring whatever aspect of yourself you want to be present and respected at work, and it should be present and respected at work. You don't have to bring everything. You don't have to disclose anything you don't want to, whether it is that you have kids or that you attended Catholic high school or whatever the hell it is. Doesn't matter. So that just to clear things up a little bit. Well, but I am looking forward to the panel, because I don't know, but all this other stuff, it's good stuff. I just came from this incredible human AI teaming, panel that was just amazing. So it's all good.
Jules, thank you so much for being on the show. I, again, have wanted you to be on for so long. I'm so glad we had a chance to make it happen. Yeah. Thank you for coming on and talk about the LGBTQ plus affinity group, the queer affinity group.
Yes, you can say that. I love that. Thank you. Nice to meet you.